Peterson, who is Family Care Navigator here at Memory Movement. She
Yes.
will moderate tonight.
Yes, hi, I'm Courtney Peterson, and I've been here at Memory Movement for about a year. And I'm a family care navigator. My background is in social work. And so I'm happy to be here tonight to moderate this conversation. And we have a rough outline, but we kind of want to go where the conversation goes. So yeah, we're open to that. So the rest of the panel is here. This is Bruce Caldwell. And do you want to just say a little bit about yourself, and how you're connected?
Yeah, I guess grew up in Charlotte after I got to be a teenager. Visited all kinds of different cities with my dad when he was architect and trying to get his license and that kind of thing. But ended up meeting my wife in high school at Garinger High School in Charlotte. And dated her friends, all but her. Senior, dated her when I was a senior, and then we fell in love, and we promised our parents we wouldn't get married till we graduated from college. So we both graduated from UNC Charlotte in 1970. We got married on June the 7th, graduated on the 28th of May. I went in the Army Reserves on the 14th of June. I went to work for Duke Energy on the 1st of June. She went to work for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system on the 1st of June. And then the rest of it's sort of history there. We've been married. She passed away a year ago, this past November. So 53 years we were married. So got 2 children, a boy and a girl. And so my daughter lives very close to me, right next door. Our son is in Georgia. We started learning about Memory and Movement Center, I guess, through contact that we had Dr. Faust, who was a pastor, still is, I guess, at St. John's Baptist Church. And his wife worked here. And my dad, and I was getting ready to retire in 2016. And my dad started having problems with his side. Came to the doctor about this time of year in 2016, or 2015 actually. And one thing led to another. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He died within 3 months. So he had been taking care of my mother, who'd had a broken hip. And so I ended up taking care of both of them. My brother and I were there until he passed away in the house. And then my mother, she was doing fine, except she had heart conditions. And she finally passed away of a heart attack in 2017, early 2017. And my brother and I were still taking care of her. And just about that time, my wife, we sort of suspected some problems. And so one thing after another, we found out about Dr. Edwards through the Faust, and started, talking to them, and then we signed up with the Memory and Movement Center at that point. And so we've had a long-term relationship all the way through to palliative care, hospice, and all that kind of stuff with my wife. And she passed away peacefully at home. Yeah. That's a little bit about me. Don't want to hear the rest of it. More pages for
So I'm Chris Jones, and I came to Charlotte to go to Queen's University many years ago, and I majored in psychology and sociology, and then have a degree in counseling. So I've always been, I just enjoy working a lot with people and listening and problem solving. And my husband went to Davidson, and after he graduated, he went up to law school, and then we came back to Charlotte and really formed such a great network of friends. And I say that because it really leads into all the groups I've actually been in because of this large group of friends of mine. We've helped each other through a lot of different chapters of life, which I'll talk about later. But when Bill was diagnosed with dementia, I really hadn't expected it. He was a health food nut. I mean, he exercised. He was the chief judge here. He was highly acclaimed and a wonderful human being. And it really, it just blew me away. I didn't expect it. And I was seeing a neurologist, and it was one of those situations where the neurologist was not warm and was sort of confrontational, really. And I just needed to get out of there. And so I happened to be at a gathering where one of my friends said, I went to high school with Dr. Edwards, Chuck Edwards. He's going to start Memory and Movement. I mean, we were right on his doorstep the minute the day it opened. And because, it was so new, we really got a lot of his attention. So my two sons came regularly with me, and we sat in all those meetings. And he really helped us. So.
And Chris's son is now on our board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Joan?
Joan Wright, and how I came to Memory Movement Charlotte. Actually, I was involved in running a caregiver support group. Let the truth be known, I followed Janet LeClaire from the Ivy over here. She's our CEO here. And she was so instrumental at a time when I had hit the ceiling of complexity with my mother, who had advanced dementia. And Janet and some others helped me navigate through all of that. And it was just a pay it forward kind of thing that I wanted to get involved. So I'm also known as the therapy dog lady. So here are our two certified therapy dogs, and we literally hang out in the reception area and have a chance to do a lot of meet and greet. This can be a really challenging appointment. When you come here, it can be long. You're separated from the person that you're caregiving for, your loved one, or you might have a whole family that arrives and has to wait. And so with Brody and Oliver, we have a lot of good conversation, and it just takes a little bit of the tension down and the focus off of the big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're so glad to have y'all here. Let's, Joan, we'll go back to you, and I want you to just talk a little bit more about pet therapy and then kind of your counseling and coaching, and ways to reduce anxiety, I think, during, especially during this time with caregiving.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So, how I got involved with the therapy dog work, it actually happened, both my parents died of advanced dementia, and my father being 10 years older than my mother, I was not his caregiver. But when I went to visit them, and particularly him, I'll never forget how hard it was to be present with him in the room. And he had this chair that he would sit in, and this was a man who lived large. By 9 o'clock, he would have, in his retirement, read 5 newspapers, and I just was, very, very disturbed by his sitting and just rubbing his head, and I was just like, I can't do this. And then I started to notice something that was just sort of an opening. And my parents had a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel dog, and he loved that dog, Oliver number 1. And Oliver would sit on his lap and he would pet the dog. And then he'd start talking about the dog. I'd start talking to him about the dog. We would have dog talk and, go for a walk with the dog. And all of a sudden, I'm back present with him. And I think that's really what the benefit of therapy work. And, you all know that therapy dogs are used in a variety of ways, but I think they can be particularly valuable here. So like Chris, I have a coaching and leadership development background, and I have an MSW, and I myself noticed how challenging it was as a caregiver for my mother for over 5 years, how hard it was to take care of myself. And I think Courtney wanted me to share one little hack. you know, caregiving is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have no idea when the journey will end. I just knew that I had to take my own medicine. And the one thing that was particularly helpful for me was exercise. Luckily, that came naturally for me, but I didn't realize that all the cortisol that was pumping through my system as a caregiver, as I was trying to control, manage, manipulate the situation, that, you know, I was putting a lot of strain on my system. Now, when you get some good exercise, that cortisol, and Dr. Wu and some of the other neurologists can do a much better job of explaining how that shifts. It really does turn into the good stuff, you know, and so all of a sudden, you know, you're like, okay, I can take on another afternoon here.
Yeah, good.
And, you know, it helps your sleep improve, and all of that. And not everybody has the benefit of going to a class or going to a gym or going for a 5-mile walk. But I know people who set up an exercise station in their home, and a lot of our loved ones that we're caring for do take naps. Some of them take a morning nap, much like a toddler, and an evening nap. And so you can get the baby monitor on and go to your exercise station and get your exercise in.
If anyone has any questions while we're talking, please feel free to speak up.
Did I cover?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In regards to the therapy dogs, do you find that those who gravitate more toward the dogs are those who are already pet lovers? And have you seen where there's an individual who may not have ever cared for dogs, maybe take on one and have it be therapeutic for them?
I think that's a really good question. My training and the dog's training is pretty comprehensive. And we know that we do not approach somebody unless they've invited us into their space. So if there is some hesitancy, then, you know, I will back off. And there, you know, it's just an intuitive thing. And then you can ask permission if it looks like they're interested. But I used to spend a lot of time over at the Ivy, which is a respite care center. And a lot of the clients over there, you know, even if they didn't have a live dog, they had a toy stuffing, and they would be petting, you know, it's that tactile thing. So I think you can become a dog lover for the first time.
But have you seen people who maybe in the beginning did not care for dogs become a dog lover or become
I
open to
don't
the
have
therapy?
an example of that, but I could see how it could be possible.
Okay.
Yeah, especially if they were bitten by a dog,
Or
you know, in their,
something, yeah, I
or,
don't
you know,
know what-
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
I know the story is with my dad, but growing up, we could never have dogs. He's terrified of dogs. And I myself wanted a dog. I need it for me. I knew that.
Right.
And I actually bought one from, I think it was Costco, and his name is Biscuit, and he's about this tall. And, you know, he barks and he moves. And I got him for myself for Christmas, but I think I might have to take it back because of the way my dad may respond to it. But I need Biscuit for me. He's so cuddly and he's so cute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and that's our topic today, is what's good for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point. That's really when so much of the focus is on our loved one, you know, we put ourselves on the back burner. And so, you know, a lot of times when I'm speaking to caregivers and care plans, we talk a lot about, you know, you have to do what's best for you. You have to engage in socialization. You have to, you know, if the right decision for you is to bring in an in-home caregiver, you think your loved one may not want that or agree to that, yes, that's hard and we honor and respect that, but we know that we have to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of somebody else. And I think it's, but it's hard to do, and sometimes you just need that extra push of someone telling you, you should do this. It's okay to do this. Do you want to speak to that at all about knowing what it's?
Yeah, I'll speak to that.
Yeah.
So, so when Bill was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I pretty quickly realized that it was going to be just too hard to just take care of by myself. He was 6'2", and as you can see, I'm 5 feet shrinking in this chair, and it was so demanding. And it's so painful to watch somebody who's so bright and so smart lose that capability. And I got to the point I didn't want, friends would call and say, want to come over and visit Bill? And I didn't want them to because he couldn't carry on a conversation. So I really got more and more isolated. And that's when I decided to go to the Ivy. And when I went to the Ivy, I finally was sitting in a group of other caregivers just like me. And that was one of the most helpful things that I did for myself, because it is so stressful. And to be in a space with people going through the same thing, it just gets back to the value of support groups. You're listening to each other, you're encouraging each other, you're sharing the heartache together. Every once in a while, somebody will laugh. But I really felt so good about that experience and feel very grateful for it. And since then, I've been, leading support groups, but that's how I got started in it.
Just as an aside, Chris runs one of our longest running support groups. When did this group begin? But you're still.
It's really going to go on 3 years. I think. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's been a delight just because of the honesty in the room, the genuineness of people caring for each other, the ideas that have come up. It's been great.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to become isolated. And so, going to a support group, whether it's once a week, whether it's once every other week, whatever, is so helpful, and just feeling like you're not alone, and that even if your loved one is in a different stage, you still have people who get it. And I just think that is so important for caregivers and their mental health and caring for someone, because it is a long process, and it's stressful and it's hard. And so, we're built for that. Humans are built for social connection. And I think just attending a support group, being around other people who have, similar experiences is very beneficial. Any questions?
Bruce, you began as a member of Chris's support group. Is that
Oh, yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got one or two up
We've
here
got
on
some
the
up
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really a saving grace for me, to be able to have others that you could talk to. They're like friends, they're like family, almost, with Chris leading us, and we've had some members that have, their spouses have passed away and they're not with us. Some have come back. Mine's passed away, but I'm still with the group because I really enjoyed the group. I think I can still contribute to the group.
Yes, very much.
They sort of call me Mr. Gadget. I'm an engineer by training, so, I came up with all these camera systems that we could use. My wife had one of these satellite watches that you could get from the sheriff's department. And I would take her, finally got her into some adult daycare in Gaston County. And it was really very inexpensive. At the time I started, like $25 a day. And then it went to 50, and then COVID hit, and then we had to back her out of that. And now she started back again. But I went on a learning mission too, trying to learn as much as I could, building a better caregiver. Was one of the courses I took from UNC Charlotte. It was online during COVID, so you could take that. So I know you struggle with, how can I do this? I'm taking care of this person. I don't have time to come to this meeting. I don't have time to go to this training, but I was able to make time because I could, have her asleep or whatever she was doing. And so then I could, go to the online classes. Some of them were late at night. You could do it that way. So that helped, I think. I was really benefited by my daughter who lives not right next door to me. And she's a nurse, by the way. So I really had a built-in assistant caregiver, that helped me quite a bit with her. So it meant a lot.
When you took your wife to adult daycare, was she okay with that, or did she try to fight
At first, she
that?
did not like it, she would not. But the daycare that I found, they only take 16 at one time. They have 2 rooms. They had 2 rooms because of, they're getting ready for COVID stuff going on. But they have a ratio of like 2 facilitator people there per 8 people that are they're caring for. The one rule was they couldn't be incontinent. You got into the incontinence kind of thing. But it was, they played games, they played cards, they had stuffed animals for them. They gave us a little cat and a dog, one of the ones that would meow and whatever. She would hold that thing, she thought it, because she was a pet store owner for 20 years. Raised Boston Terriers, had 25 champion Boston Terriers. Had been to England, been to New York, all the shows and that kind of thing. So she was an animal lover to start with and raised a lot. So, but all that, at least the information that I tried to collect, I felt I could share with y'all, recordings of, quiet time, all kinds of techniques and things that I learned, from some of the classes. Really, I think, benefited me, and I felt, good in sharing those with people.
He's such a great example, though, of why support groups are so wonderful. Because people really did share, and you did such an exceptional job of doing that. We learned all kinds of things about certain gadgets and how to get his wife out of bed and all kinds of. So
Depends, the best depends there are.
It depends.
Oh, yeah.
We learned a lot about those. So
Technical stuff.
people really share, and they really help you.
Well, and I think that's a bit of a different model than we know, let's say, from the 12-step groups, where there isn't crosstalk. There's not a lot of advice giving except for after the meeting. And I think the kind of caregiver support groups that we're talking about is not going to withhold something that could be very valuable for you. And, getting into the nitty-gritty. Yeah.
Yeah, she would always ask us, how do you feel? How do you really feel? What is going on? She would ask some probing questions to get our attention. And sometimes it was hard to share. Right? It was definitely,
Everybody took risks. I want to comment about that, about asking questions. I think it would be important because, you can go into you can go into support group and everybody's quiet. And so, and I really wanted to hear from everyone. So in the beginning, I asked open-ended questions, and I asked everybody to answer those. So everybody was participating. And for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, how are you currently feeling, and what is contributing to that score? Or what are you doing that's helping manage the stress of caregiving? What do you need to do more of or less of? And so on. So I just came up with different questions each time, and I thought it was helpful.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
It really, because we went around the room making sure everybody participated.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, especially helpful in the beginning,
Yes.
if it's a new group. And
Yes,
then once people get to know each other, the one we do a support group here, twice a month, we do a virtual and an in-person, and we have a lot of regular attendees. And so, you warm up to people and you feel more comfortable sharing. So I think it's good to kind of have that structure, but also leave time for for people to share what they want to share.
I live in Monroe, and the Council on Aging there have a support group that they do at the Active Adult Center. And it varies in the number. There are probably about maybe 7 of us that are consistent. And we talk everybody talks every time. And I think we look forward to it because we can express ourselves to people who are going through some of the same things that we are in different phases or stages, like you mentioned. And when it's your turn to talk, you just introduce yourself and you tell who you care for and their age, and the next question is what's going on this week, or what's happening this month. And I really enjoy it. I do. It helps me a lot.
So I had a question, excuse me, my wife went to a Panther game the other day. Can I talk? My wife, is going through early stages of, and they got some therapy recommended from here. Speech and occupational and physical, but she's very resistant to it. She's like, like the lady's coming tomorrow. And today she said, well, that's all right, but I know tomorrow morning she's gonna go, tell her not to come. I don't want her here. And so how do you get her, we can't even do all three. They wanted to do, each one of them wanted to come twice a week. And so we bumped it down, but just one comes twice a week, the occupational. But every day she's coming, she's like, I don't want her here, call her. I said, well, I can't call her now. I'm kind of lying. I'm just saying.
That's it.
She's got to come. Maybe we canceled it yesterday, but I mean, what do you?
You bring them in as a disguise, maybe they come in with a costume on, or maybe you have them come in with a dog, or something else. If you can get them distracted and at least get them to meet the person and let the person talk about themselves or ask about them, let them explain what did you do in your job, or what did you do here? If you can get that bond started, I think when I introduced
after day one, she was like, the girl's name's Morgan. She says, oh man, Morgan, she's a really nice lady. She's done 6 sessions.
Yeah.
But the last 4 have all been, so it's almost like a smoker. I compared it to, because if you don't want to quit, you're not going to quit. So I'm thinking, if she doesn't want the therapy, how beneficial is it? So, and you only get 16, we're only getting 16 sessions through.
But any interaction that you have with somebody else that they can interact with, it stimulates them, I found, I mean, I would take my wife to church. I would take her everywhere I could, just for that exposure. And sometimes it wasn't comfortable. Sometimes she would act out. Sometimes she would do some strange things or ask questions over and over and over, kind of thing. But you just have to invent all kinds of different tricks and ways to do it. I'm not good at that, but I learned a lot from other people. So,
well, you got gadgets. I mean, sometimes it might be a gadget.
Yeah.
I know everybody, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I also think that, because this is a common issue, right? When, our loved ones don't want to comply or don't want to do something. I think it's really important that we validate that feeling, that we say, like, I understand, I get it. I think anyone wants to feel like they're validated. It doesn't mean that we don't, that we change the plans. It just says, I understand you're not looking forward to it today. And then maybe you try to redirect the conversation on why it is important. Or, she's planned her day. This is her job and she's planned her day around this. And so we can't cancel. But I think it is really important to acknowledge their feelings. Because sometimes I think that can be harder to do when they're being not wanting to comply. It can be easy to get argumentative, or, well, this is why you need to do this, and so I think acknowledgement is really important.
Is it important that the person know that it's therapy? Like, can you say, Morgan, our friend Morgan's coming for a visit, and she wants to do she's learning these exercises, she wants us to help her or whatever? Or maybe she's just visiting and there's games or whatever.
And I kind of tell her, saying, look, this is beneficial down the road. And we got to utilize the 16 sessions we get, and we're going to move on to something else. But
maybe for your wife, don't even call it therapy or sessions or whatever. Just your friend Morgan, remember her? She was so nice. She's coming over again.
Yeah.
And, give her cookies.
Yeah, I think that's
Melanie, I really like that way of looking at it. Because I think what you're trying to do is build rapport and trust. And a good therapist, knows to do that. And so they're trying to, you
Yeah.
know, make a friend. And then, you know, all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but gradually there's an opening to, well, let's see you, get up, and down, out of that chair. How are you doing with that?
We have a question up here. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It says, how early in the diagnosis did you tell people, especially if you're active and go places? That might be for you, Bruce.
Oh, gosh.
Actually,
Yeah.
could be for anyone.
Yes. I mean,
My wife did not want anybody to know at first, you know, that was in 2017. But her friends, you know, could tell something was going on. And so finally talked her into telling, you know, her best two friends. And then they, you know, gradually sort of engaged with her. But I mean, she was asking them questions over and over again, you know, at that point in time. So they knew. And I just, we kept working with that. And my daughter kept working with her. She didn't want to tell my son, you know, he was in Georgia. She didn't want to tell him. But, you know, I just had to tell some people that I knew, like, you know, the pastor of our church and some other ones. I said, I'm just telling you this confidential. You just don't let her know that you know anything about it. And that's what I would do. I actually had some cards at one time. I said, Dean, she's in dementia. No, she's in this stage. She can't communicate. She can't remember, you know, something. She may, you know, say this, repeat it over and over. And I would pass it to them, you know, when it was a meeting or something.
There are some out there to give it.
Yeah, you can
We actually
actually,
have some, we can grab them. Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Use our review.
And they would look at it and they would go, oh, you know, like that. I would say, keep it confidential at the bottom of it.
Well, did she ever say to you, what'd you just give him?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, once or twice she would, I mean, she would go, you know, they go through all these phases and she would get angry. And then later on, she got as sweet as she could be, just like her normal self, you know, kind of thing. So, and then she didn't worry about it anymore, you know, especially when she couldn't communicate with me. That was the hardest part when she was not telling me stuff, you know, talking to me. I was losing her little by little.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm curious, how you handled that, because of, you know, such a public figure.
So a lot of stories, but just first of all, Bill told me he wanted to tell people. So he made this whole list of who he was going to tell. I don't think he ever sent it, but he did say, I think there were two couples he wanted to tell. So they were having dinner with us and he told them, and everybody just sobbed. Oh, it was so emotional. And then there were so many incidents that he was working on this big project out in LA. And of course he had to change planes in Colorado. There was no way he could make that. So I got to know the leaders of these teams he was on, and I called them and told them to call Bill and tell them they're canceled. So I was doing all kinds of devious things for quite a while. It really felt crummy, but I didn't know what else to do. And I did that. And then, you know, eventually people just see. I think my bind was people wanted to come over all the time. And I found it very hard to have people see him in the state he was in. It felt so sad and painful. So that's when I got really isolated. And then I went over to the Ivy and ended up in this fabulous support group over there. So, great.
How long did all that go? I remember it happening, but it seems like it lasted for a long time.
Bill's illness, 8 years.
Yeah.
Very hard.
If anyone wants to hear a lot more about Chris and Bill's story, Dr. Edwards hosted Chris for one of his podcast episodes in season 1, I think. So that's on our website.
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks. That was been very, very wonderful to work with him on that.
That's a great story. Can you talk a little bit, Courtney, about care plan appointments and what those are for?
So care plans are a 60-minute appointment with the Family Care Navigator team. So we have 3 other people on our Family Care Navigator team, and they're also with advanced practice provider, so PA. I guess we don't have any nurse practitioners anymore, but excuse me, the provider is there for the first few minutes, 15 minutes or so of the appointment to go over any kind of medical specific related questions, diagnosis, any kind of very medical related questions. The rest of the appointment is really talking about planning for the future, talking about any safety issues or concerns that are coming up. And it's really a time where the caregiver is able to talk with our staff one-on-one. So the patient typically does not come to these appointments. Every so often we also have patients with Parkinson's. And so there may be a patient who wants to be involved in their own care plan appointment where that's appropriate, but the majority do not come to this appointment. So it's really caregiver focused. And we talk with you on how to best support you, anywhere from referring a counselor, telling you about our support groups, coming up with helpful tips to kind of keep your loved one safe in the home. We talk about preventing scams, that kind of thing. So it's really, it's a very comprehensive appointment that I think most people find I would say everybody finds it very helpful, and getting to meet with us and have that kind of plan. Typically they're once a year. If there is a change in status, so a move or a hospitalization, a steep decline, you can do them every 6 months, but they're typically once a year. So an annual appointment.
And it's really just for caregivers.
Yes.
Yeah, but I have a question.
Get connected with what you need.
About it. Does your spouse or whoever have to be in active treatment for the caregiver to schedule an appointment?
What do you mean? They have to be a patient here.
This means a current patient
Yes.
within that year.
Think so.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
because there are some criteria, right? in order to
Yes.
do it. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think for insurance to
I mean,
cover
there's
it, because for Bruce, you mentioned in an email that you had an army of angels.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about the army?
Well, I'm not the inventor of that. It's actually on one of the podcasts on a guy named Tracy, who was caregiver for Polly. I don't know if some of you have seen that or not, but he decided he was going to form an army, war angels, he called them. And so he looked up the word warrior, and it has Sir Lancelot in there. And he said, I'm going to be the knight in shining armor. I'm going to take care of her, And he tried all kinds of things to try to get her actively engaged and stuff. But he finally ended up, like I ended up doing, is getting, first his family involved. He had a group meeting with his family, immediate family. He talked to them. He, told them what was going on. And he said, I need you to help support me. I'm the caregiver, but you can also be the caregiver. So then he went to his friends. He went to some of his coworkers. He was working at the time. He talked to his church, his Sunday school class or whatever. So I just followed that same sort of pattern and added a few more. With my daughter, I talked about being very close to me. Then I worked with her two friends, and then I branched out and I picked up the neighbors because the neighbors were spotting her. She would, when she'd go outside and would be walking the dog or doing something, she'd start babbling about something. And I said, what is going on? Kind of thing. So I had to clue them in. And then I got the doctors, Dr. Edwards, all the doctors that were involved. And Dr. Edwards was instrumental in trying to get those doctors that, to understand a little bit better about her condition. They were treating her medical symptoms, but they weren't treating her from a caregiver, taking care of her from that standpoint. The adult daycare people, I got them on board. And so they were engaged with me as a caregiver because they had her, sometimes 6 or 7 hours a day at the care center where she was going. That gave me time to support myself and take care of me as the caregiver. So I could go do some stuff. I could meet with friends. I could go out to eat. I could go play ball or whatever, I wanted to do. And then later on, I got the palliative care from hospice and hospice involved. And a word of advice, don't hesitate on getting palliative care involved as early as you can, because they will do that assessment. Dr. Edwards or whoever the doctor is here that you have would make that referral, and then they would do a little survey sample and try to figure out whether they can support you or supply some stuff there, and help you along that. And of course, we got hospice involved at the very end of it. But and then the education part, I had some people that, on the care group that we have, they got involved. Then my fellow students, when I was doing some of my education, I enlisted them. So I had a whole army, different ones that were helping to support me in one way or shape or form. Some were more active than others, but, all of them contributed something to the overall, betterment.
Yeah, and I think the important part of that is that you ask people, and you have to ask people, and that is really hard for a lot of people. It's hard to ask for help. And it's hard to be specific, but if you don't directly ask, people who are not in that same situation don't really understand. So they may say, let me know what you need. Well, instead of that, maybe saying, can you come once a week and take my loved one to lunch? Can you help me with grocery shopping every 2 weeks or whatever? I think making a specific ask, and being willing to ask people, because it's very hard to get, or it's very easy to get kind of stuck in your own overwhelm and not feel like, oh, well, just if I have to ask this one person or explain. But in the long run, I think it's very helpful when you say to have.
That's part of your care team.
Yes.
Listing, you call it care team, which is the same sort of thing. And it's talking about, errands or picking up stuff for you or delivering it or whatever.
Yeah, and I think about if it were us, if someone was asking us too, I think this, for me, the more specific, the better, when I want to do something for someone, but I want it to be helpful. So just being, specific about how they can help you, I think is good.
Yeah.
Have a list, a sign-up sheet.
Yeah, seriously. Make a list of things people can do.
Mhm.
If anyone has any questions on Zoom, feel free to turn your mic on and ask away or type it into the chat box. I have another question. Can I ask another one? I'm curious, we've talked a lot about what participants get from a support group. What does the leader learn? Like you're getting something great out of this, I imagine. I want to hear about it.
I'll jump in. So my mother died about 5.5 years ago, and I've been, to one degree or another, paying it forward since then. And I had a very complicated relationship with my mother, and then when the dementia hit, oh my gosh, she was very resistant. My husband's here too. Everything from I'm writing you out of my will, you're a monster, you're not the boss of me, all of that stuff, but I had to keep going. But I'm going to jump on a couple things. We did not wait too long to get hospice to come in. And there was such a beautiful moment when hospice came in, because hospice said, her name was Madeline. Madeline, if you don't want to drink any water anymore, you don't have to drink any water anymore. If you want to have ice cream for breakfast, you can have ice cream for breakfast. You mean I'm the boss of me? Not her. And that just opened up this beautiful shift in our relationship. And she was alive long enough for us to reconcile. And being in these caregiver support groups, doing the therapy dog work, I have such good memories of her. You don't hear me trashing her much. She was a really, I have I could tear up thinking about the change in my feelings about my mother. It is.
Yeah, that's really.
And that's because, to answer your question,
Yeah.
I have gotten so much back and I will continue.
Yeah.
I have a question in regards to hospice. I heard you say, don't wait too long to bring them in. At what point, well, not even at what point, doesn't hospice make the decision as to whether or not they care for your loved one? So did she have to be at a certain stage?
She was evaluated.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
they evaluate.
hospice will come in and
Yeah.
evaluate, and then they make the determination
Yeah.
whether
So-
or not it's time.
So I run a caregiver support group. And that is probably the number one topic, is when do we call hospice? And what's interesting, I don't have to say much, and my co-facilitator doesn't have to say much. The others will say, don't wait too long. Because, it doesn't mean that death is imminent.
It
Right.
really doesn't.
It just means that you are, I wish I could remember the quote, but you are caring for their comfort versus trying to cure them.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Dementia, there's,
No cure.
there's no real cure.
And the doctors here will tell you, I mean, they told us it's time that you get hospice or palliative care
Yeah, I was
involved.
gonna say, rely on, other medical professionals if they're saying,
Yeah,
we
they-
recommend you call hospice, they're gonna do the assessment, and if they say, oh, we don't think she's, he or she is at that point yet, well, they'll tell you, but, I think a lot of people put it off just because it's, it just, like anything, like dementia, it just has this kind of reputation, this negative, when it really
Yeah.
can bring a lot of peace and a lot of, help in the later stages and days.
Yeah, and
Weeks.
for the family.
Yes,
for sure.
So my sister and I, our husbands, grandchildren, all became part of this hospice support system.
And you can come under palliative care before you're ready
Uh-huh.
for hospice, and then they can be the bridge,
Right.
and then they can be the bridge into hospice when things begin to change. So you can start palliative care much earlier, and all that's covered under Medicare.
And that's keeping somebody comfortable at home.
Exactly.
But you can still treat for other, not dementia, there isn't much, but like at cancer, you can still be going through treatment. Hospice has different criteria, but you can reach out, and if they're not ready for hospice, then they'll often, and they have different services, not as much, not as intense, but it gets you connected to that wonderful group of people.
When Bill was in the facility, they said to me, I think it's time to call hospice. And they said, this is not saying it's tomorrow or even 3 or 4 months from now, it turned out to be 6, but what that person did, Bill just loved birds. And he brought his laptop and they went around looking for birds, and he was showing him pictures every day. So it was a very nice, touching relationship. And then one day I walked in, where the hospice person came, and the nurse said to me, Bill told me he's ready to go. And he just got under the covers. And that was had enough time to call everybody, but I felt the hospice people were wonderful, very caring, very willing to tap into his hobbies and interests. Very gentle people.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone. If there are no more questions, Alvin from the room.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for joining us in person and over Zoom. Thank you so much, and seriously, happy holidays to all.
Thank you.